All right, good morning. So we are going to be talking about Reconstruction today. So last week we talked about the Civil War and then we moved on to Juneteenth. So now let's go ahead and move on to Reconstruction. And this is how the Union basically becomes one again, right? Bringing the South back to the Union. Reconstruction is going to last a while and it is going to be broken up in different phases. And I'll get into all of that in the lecture. Just an FYI, this is a longer lecture, so you might want to chunk it up. There are some readings that are going to go along with it, so you might want to pause and read and then come back. Normally, I guess in class I would take maybe 2 days to do this, but I'm recording it for you guys so you guys can kind of go at your own pace. Okay, so Reconstruction was an attempt to achieve national unification after the Civil War and to improve the lives of former slaves. Now, yes, let's go ahead and unify. Let's bring the South back. Let's completely fix the South, right? Because remember, it's completely destroyed. But also now we have freed men that we need to take care of. So those are all things that are going to go into Reconstruction. It says here, difficult and painful from the beginning with the assassination of President Lincoln. Differing views about how Reconstruction should take place. So basically, presidential Reconstruction is going to be very different from congressional Reconstruction. Again, I'll explain that coming up, but everyone had different ideas of what it should look like. This is why it was kind of painful and long too, right? Also, debatable how effective Reconstruction really was. And we will discuss that on Monday after we come back from break. So after the Civil War, the South, remember, is going to remain in ruins. If you guys remember Sherman's March to Sea, they completely destroy a bunch of big cities in the South. So you have cities like Richmond, Charleston, Atlanta that are completely destroyed. Not just from Sherman's March to Sea, but also because remember a lot of the battles did take place in the South. So the South is just ruined. There's a lot of economic issues, which tends to happen during a time of war, right? Inflation, factories destroyed, banks ruined, transportation systems destroyed. So basically, it is completely ruined. There's also a lot of agricultural problems because a lot of the men that were marching with Sherman did destroy this, but also now a lot of the slaves that were free, well, they did leave. So now fields did lay untended. And then again, livestock killed by the Union troops. It is going to take about 5 years for agricultural output to return to its 1860 pre-Civil War level. So a lot of your southern white plantation owners, your aristocracy, they're completely devastated. They're not as worth as much anymore. They're plantation owners, right? So a lot of their value goes down because their slaves are gone. They disappeared and the plantations are destroyed as well as the mansions, sorry. Okay, so during this time of Reconstruction, there's going to be corruption in the South, right? Obviously, when it's time to kind of get something going back up again, corruption kind of erupts. So there are two different terms here that you should know about, scalawags and carpetbaggers. So scalawags, these people were Southern men who supported Reconstruction, or so they said they did. A lot of the white Southerners joined the Republican Party last minute. Many were small farmers who wanted to improve their economic position and did not want the wealthy landowners to regain power. They did support Reconstruction and cooperated with African Americans in order to achieve success on their ends, right? But also, I think a lot of it was they just wanted to kind of benefit on their own, right? And they didn't want these plantation owners who already had all the power to regain the power. The carpetbaggers, these were Northern Republicans who then went to the South after the Civil War to seek their fortune. A lot of them were motivated by profit. Some genuinely wanted to help and rebuild the South, and others and wanted to help the plight of the freedmen. So they wanted to help out the new freedmen, African Americans. But then a lot of them just go to kind of take advantage and see, like, well, what can I gain from this, right? Okay, so again, the phases of Reconstruction, you guys, are going to come out in 3 different phases. The first phase is presidential Reconstruction. So we're going to talk about Lincoln's plan versus Johnson's plan. So it's going to it's going to come out first in 1863. It did come out right before the Civil War ended. Unfortunately, Lincoln dies, so he doesn't really get to present his Reconstruction plan or act on it. So then we're going to see Andrew Johnson and what he wanted. But it's not going to last very quickly. Because congressional Reconstruction comes in because Congress wants something different. But this plan emphasizes unity and did not focus on punishment of the South. Basically, they just want to get the South back up and be part of the Union as quickly as possible. Phase 2, congressional Reconstruction, you have your radical Republicans that are not okay with presidential Reconstruction. They think they're being way too lenient. So they're going to be like, no, we're going to do our thing. And it's going to be very different. So it is more powerful at the beginning. It is defined by these radical Republicans. It is going to emphasize punishment of the South and legislation to ensure the abolition of slavery. And lastly, phase 3 is redemption in the South. Southern white Democrats reclaim local and state politics, and this is going to make them basically regain all the power that they lost. And it is going to be characterized by terrorizing freed slaves. So we're going to see a lot of that. Again, I'm going to go in depth in the next upcoming slide. So if you're like, what the heck did she just say? Don't worry about it. I'm going to explain it. Okay, so the very first plan is President Lincoln's plan. So this was known as the 10% Reconstruction Plan. So remember, Lincoln believed that the secession had been illegal, right? And the South had never really left the Union. So he thought, okay, reunion could be and should be swift and easy without any punishments. So very lenient sort of policy here to reunite. It is going to be revealed in 1863. He announces his proclamation of amnesty and Reconstruction plan. When the war was still going on. Why? Because he does want to shorten the war, right? He's going to show the South, like, look, I want to help you out. I don't want to punish you. So he does this on purpose, right? He says, let's shorten the war, South. I'm just going to let you come back easily, and this is what I need you guys to do. So this is what the plan said. 10% of ex-Confederate states need to pledge allegiance to the U.S. So basically 10% of whatever the census said of 1860, only 10%. That's not a lot. So as long as 10% of people said, all right, we pledge to be, loyal to the Union from now on and not to secede, then we're good. States could, but did not have to create a government to be recognized by the federal government. So basically create their own constitution again, say that they won't secede, no slavery, send it to the government, federal government, but again, it did not have to be recognized by the federal government. As soon as they did have the 10 people that said that, yes, we pledge allegiance to the Union, and now here is our plan or not, then Lincoln would have allowed these former Confederate states to send their representatives to Congress. Also, with this plan, government did intend to pardon all Confederates except for high-ranking officials and those that were accused of crime against prisoners of war. Those had to swear allegiance, and then they would be forgiven. Okay. Obviously, it's going to be rejected by Republicans, but when this plan was laid out, you had Arkansas, Louisiana, and Tennessee that said, all right, we will go with this plan. So they are admitted back to the Union. Okay. One more thing in here. So it is going to be rejected by your radical Republicans in Congress, again, because they're upset and they think that the South should be punished more, right? So they are going to start coming up with their own plan, and I'll tell you what it was all about. But basically, one of the things that they really want to push is that freedmen are included in a lot of these Reconstruction plans, meaning they not only should get full freedom, right, with the 13th Amendment, but they should also get rights. So they want them to get civil rights and voting rights. Okay, the state suicide theory here. Republicans believed Confederate states had forfeited all their rights by seceding from the Union. Um, Therefore, they have no rights, and it's going to be hard for them to regain their rights. So this is what your radical Republicans are planning after Lincoln introduces his plan. They are going to introduce the Wade-Davis Bill of 1864. So they're going to say, okay, 10% too little. Let's have 50% of state voters in 1860 election that have to pledge allegiance to the U.S. They must have constitutions, state constitutions, and they have to ban slavery, and they have to they're going to be readmitted as conquered provinces. What does this mean? I'll tell you in a second, but meaning they need someone to oversee kind of their area for a bit. In addition, they wanted states to give blacks the right to vote. Lincoln's going to pocket veto this, so basically pocket veto just means he's going to hang on, not sign it until it expires, because a bill does expire. Once it's too late, then it dies. So of course it's not going to get signed because, well, Lincoln dies. So after his assassination, the plan is in jeopardy. Now comes Andrew Johnson, who was VP. Remember, Andrew Johnson was a Democrat, right? He's a Southern Democrat, and this was on purpose. A couple more things about Andrew Johnson before we get into him. So he was the first president to be impeached by Congress, but not removed from office. He is on that list of Johnson and Clinton and Trump. He's a president who also came from humble beginnings, born pretty poor. He does become an orphan, never attended school, but he was an apprentice at a very young age. He's one who was self-taught and self-educated, so he teaches himself to read. And then his wife later taught him math and how to write. Remember, I said Johnson was picked because Lincoln needed to attract support from the South. And so he said, look, South, this is another way I'm showing you I'm not against you. And so he picks Andrew Johnson as his VP. Johnson did believe in the constitutional right to own slaves. He did not own slaves, though. Okay, so Andrew Johnson. Johnson remained in the Senate even after his home state of Tennessee seceded. So he was a senator before he becomes president. He also was governor of Tennessee after Union troops regained the states. And I already told you Southern Democrat comfort. Okay. He only serves 1 month as VP, then becomes president. And then there's a question mark here. Most racist president in history. I'll tell you why. He might be. Or some believe. Okay. So Johnson also favors reuniting the Union as quickly as possible. Kind of like Lincoln's 10% plan, but it is going to differ a little bit. The major difference was that Johnson tried to break the planters' power by excluding high-ranking Confederates and wealthy Southern landowners from taking oath for voting privileges. But he is going to end up pardoning a ton, more than 13,000 former Confederates, because he believed that white men alone must manage the South. So his plan specifically said state conventions requiring repeal of ordinances of secession, payment of all Confederate debts, and ratification of the 13th Amendment. So he does believe that slavery should be abolished now. Pardon ex-Confederates. Now, radical Republicans assumed that he would not put land back in the hands of Southern aristocracy because Johnson always had a thing against them, right? Because he was a poor man. So they thought, he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. But he does. So radical Republicans are not happy because this is going to pretty much give them easy access to regain all the power. So again, when radical Republicans take control in Congress in 1866, they're going to be out for revenge. With Johnson's plan, the 7 remaining ex-former Confederate states agreed to the plan. So now you have the others that are like, okay, fine, we'll take this. why is he known, or why do some historians say that he might be the most racist president ever? Okay, well, here we go. He repeatedly rejected legislation to improve the lives of freedmen. So he's going to veto the Civil Rights Bill of 1866. The Civil Rights Bill basically gives African American citizenship and forbids states from passing discriminatory laws that restrict the lives of African Americans. There's a Civil Rights Bill, so many that pass after this, that keep trying to make sure that, you know, African Americans are being given the rights they deserve. And it's going to go till the 1960s, you guys, with the civil rights of the 1960s. So it's going to take a while. He's also going to veto the Freedmen's Bureau. So the Freedmen's Bureau basically was established by Congress during this time to help former black slaves and even poor whites in the South after the Civil War. It was like sort of a place where they were able to go for education, for help looking for jobs, for basic needs like food and clothes and medical services. And so they keep funding it, and then it's going to come up again like, oh, should we fund it again? And he's going to be like, no. And then he also wanted to block the 14th Amendment, which is the amendment that gives all citizens of the United States basically the same rights. So this would include African Americans. All right. So in 1866, you are going to, actually, I'm thinking this might be a good time to pause and read the Black Codes. So I would pause here right after Andrew Johnson, read the first reading, the Black Codes, and basically these Black Codes were designed to regulate the affairs of emancipated African Americans. You're going to see some states that are going to pass laws and other southern states to follow as well, which are going to prevent them from doing certain things. It's going to vary from state to state, but obviously some of the southern states were the harshest. And the reason they did this is because they want to ensure stable labor, right? They're like, okay, well, we can't have slavery, but we still need them to work for us. So let's pass some codes that are basically going to restrict them of their power. So read this one, Black Codes, and tell me what you think. And then come back to Congressional Reconstruction. This is a good pause. Okay, now we can come back to Congressional Reconstruction. Okay, so radical Republicans are going to take control in 1866. Moderate Republicans were the majority, but then you have radical Republicans that are like, we're coming after you, South. So the moderate Republicans agreed with Lincoln that the Confederate States should be reintegrated, but on Congress's terms, not the president's. However, Republicans are going to win supermajority in the House and Senate. So what this means is that they can now override a veto, a presidential veto. So remember, Lincoln pockets that veto. Nothing can be done. It's going to sit there and it's going to die. But now when you have a supermajority in Congress, they can override that veto saying, it's not going to sit there. We're going to pass it. And basically this is what they're going to do. They're going to go and get, here we go. Okay. So Congress is now in power. And they are going to pass the Military Reconstruction Act of 1867. It's basically one of the things that they wanted, right? This process to readmit the South back to the Union. So the South is going to be divided into 5 military districts, each commanded by a Union general. This is what they meant by like, we need to put someone in charge out there to make sure the South is not acting up. Requirement of seceded states to ratify the 14th Amendment. So all southern states, you need to pass the 14th Amendment. Also, states had to guarantee full suffrage for black men. So it's going to pave the way for the 15th Amendment. Military is going to oversee elections to make sure that there is no attack on African Americans, because that was very common in the South. Um, and they are basically in charge here for a little bit. Did I want to tell you something else about this? Okay. The Compromise of 1877, I said that correct, is one that's going to basically end congressional Reconstruction. It is another corrupt bargain in the United States. It's the second corrupt bargain that we are going to talk about, and you should definitely take notes on it. It's going to officially kind of end Reconstruction, and it's going to, or like presidential and congressional, and it's going to start the redemption of the South. So let me explain this to you. The election of 1876 is between Rutherford Hayes, the Republican candidate of Ohio, and Samuel Tilden, Democrat of New York. Hayes said that if he won, he would bring the blessing of honest and capable local self-government to the South. In other words, he was going to restrict federal government or federal enforcement of unpopular Reconstruction era policies. Tilden is going to win the popular vote, and he's one electoral college vote short of winning the electoral college. He's like at 184, and at the time you need 185 to win. So Hayes is like, I can't let Tilden win, so here's what I'm gonna do. Even though he's a Republican, he's gonna go and meet in secret with some modern Southern Democrats to negotiate his win. He's gonna tell them, if you help elect me, I will remove the federal troops, withdraw all the federal troops from the South. This is going to be a big no-no because, of course, yes, the Southerners are going to agree. Hayes is going to win, but the Democrats will now take control again. Oh, here's what the map looked like of how the districts were how each troop had a certain section of the South, sorry. Okay. Let's back up a little bit, though, to Johnson. We didn't finish talking about Johnson. Johnson's still in office when he was impeached. Why did they impeach him? Well, they needed to find a way to impeach him because radical Republicans were like, no, bro, you are way too lenient. We need to get you out somehow. So they are going to pass a Tenure in Office Act of 1867. The act states that presidents cannot remove Senate-approved appointees without approval of the Senate. Republicans passed the act to keep Secretary of War Stanton in Johnson's cabinet. But Johnson had fired Stanton early in 1868, and he had fired him because they did not agree on the Reconstruction plan. So Congress is like, there you go. You couldn't do that, so we have to impeach you. You broke the law. Andrew Johnson's impeachment, only president to be impeached besides Bill Clinton. Actually, now I have to put and Trump, because last year this hadn't happened. Johnson defended his decision by saying Stanton was one of Lincoln's appointees, not mine. So technically, I didn't appoint him, so I could do whatever. But Congress was like, no. So again, House impeached him. The Senate did not, so he did not get removed, but he was impeached. Okay. So radical Republicans, what they wanted to do to improve the lives of freedmen, pass the 13th Amendment, and what they did do, pass the 13th Amendment, which prohibits slavery. 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. We're going to talk a lot about the 14th Amendment when we talk about the Civil Rights Unit. 15th Amendment guarantees voting rights regardless of race, and they established the Freedmen's Bureau, again, supervise all relief and educational activities relating to refugees and freedmen, including issuing rations of food, clothing, medicine, education too. It is going to be an establishment of historically black colleges still around today, so pretty good thing here. These are just political cartoons. I'm not going to have you do them. Okay, let's talk about redemption now. How did the South take over again? This was the return of political control to Democrats in the South, the emergence of the KKK, rebellion against radical rule. What did they want to do? When people are not in power, they terrorize, right? So they're going to terrorize especially the new African American, or the freedmen and the African Americans. Now they're free. It's going to flourish in the 1860s, die out a little in the 1970s, because in the South one, again, they had power, so there's no need to terrorize. But they do come out once in a while. Still around, guys. They don't come out in the hoods, but they're still around. You have a famous quote here from Mr. Du Bois, which we will talk about as well. The slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, then moved back again toward slavery. Okay, so you have new new freedmen, right? They have freedom, or do they? Let's talk about what ends up happening here and why this quote is very relevant to what we're going to talk about now. So, despite the efforts of radical Republicans, freedmen struggled to gain political rights and economic strength after the war. Because just because they're free doesn't mean that they're going to thrive, right? They have no money. They have no education. They have really nothing. So, Freedmen's Bureau, yeah, it did help a lot of them transition, but it's not a lot. They still need to do something. They need to they need to start, right? Just figure it out. So one of the ways that they start, they think they're kind of working their way up, but actually you're going to see it's not very different from slavery, is this idea of sharecropping. So African Americans have no land, and therefore they're not able to feed families. So they have to find a way to do this. So many are forced to become sharecroppers. So basically the way this works is landowners divide their land and assign each head a household with a few acres along with seeds and tools. They're going to say, okay, I'm going to rent you this little piece of land. We're going to sign a contract. You're going to work for me for this long. You're going to pay me for the rent and for everything I'm supplying. And then the rest you can keep to yourself, which in the end, you guys, was nothing. So they were able to keep a small share and gave the rest to the landowners. Different little from slavery, or was it different? I don't know. There was still a contract, and you're going to read the contract, the sharecropping contract. This is another good pausing point. And you're going to see what would happen if they did not do everything that was in the contract. We're going to discuss all of these readings on Monday, by the way. I want to make sure that you guys all get it. So read the sharecropping contract. Essentially, it was a way to kind of trap them again, right? They had to pay all their money back, but they owed so much money and made so little money from the sharecropping that they couldn't really leave the plantation. And guess what? They were doing the work all over again for the plantation owners. All right, so let's talk about black coats now. Oh, wait. Okay, anyway. I had a little moment. Sorry, guys. Black coats, Jim Crow laws pass in the South to segregate the South. What is the difference between black coats and Jim Crow? Black coats basically were telling them what they could and couldn't do, right? Like African Americans can't be out in public after 10 p.m. African Americans can't congregate in large numbers. African Americans can't do this, can't do that. Like, what can they do? What can't they do? Jim Crow laws were segregation laws, right? So there were restaurants, actually, African Americans had to go through the back, but public facilities were segregated, right? So these are the bathrooms for African Americans. These are the bathrooms for whites. So everything that was segregated. Jim Crow laws were named after Jim Crow. It was a traveling show. This is where the blackface, if you don't know the history of the blackface, this is the blackface, and this is why it's extremely racist and derogatory, and people don't understand it and still use it, nowadays to make it be part of their costume or whatever. But Jim Crow basically was a traveling show that would go around in the South to entertain white people and to show how dumb, quote unquote, how dumb African American Jim was. And it was played out by a white actor, and he would paint his face black. So this is why the term, or not the term, the action of painting your face black is extremely racist and derogatory. Okay, so segregation, you guys, it's gonna happen, and it's gonna be a thing up to the civil rights movement of the 1960s and a little bit after. It's gonna be reinforced by the Supreme Court saying segregation's okay, separate but equal is okay, with the court case Plessy versus Ferguson. Just really quickly, Plessy versus Ferguson. So Homer Plessy was an eighth black, and he refused to sit in a Jim Crow car, and it broke the Louisiana law. So Jim Crow car just meant, public transportation at the time was like, white people in the front, black people in the back, or sometimes they had separate cars altogether. Homer's going to try to take this to court saying, this is not okay, but the Supreme Court says actually it is, because as long as you both have them, separate but equal is okay. So this was in 1896. It's not going to be overturned till Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. And even after that, it wasn't like, segregation happened. And we'll talk about that at a different unit, but it's going to take a long, long time. All right, let's talk about the 15th Amendment. Yes, the 15th Amendment did pass, but it was written in a way where they're going to find a lot of loopholes and try to say, actually, African Americans, you need this, 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 and this to vote. And it was written this way on purpose so that all the states could ratify it. So some of the loopholes they found. Poll taxes. They said, all right, you can vote, but you need to pay a tax. Well, of course, I just told you that African Americans did not really have jobs or money, so they couldn't pay the poll tax. That was a way of excluding them to vote. Literacy test, they said, okay, you can vote, but you need to read. You need to learn or you need to show us that you can read. Well, 98% of African Americans could not read at this time. So, again, couldn't vote. Or they're going to say, okay, you could vote as long as you own property. They didn't own property, so they couldn't vote. They said, okay, you can vote with the grandfather clause. The grandfather clause said you can vote if your grandfather voted. Well, we know that did not happen, right? No African American grandfathers were voting. And the ones who were allowed to vote, there was a ton of voter intimidation. Whites would stand around the polls and try to harass them, beat them. There were lynchings that happened during this time too, so you see lynchings going up. So very scary, for sure. Here's another political cartoon of intimidation. There's African Americans trying to vote. You see the poll boxes, the voting boxes there, and you see the white men with the guns. Okay, this is a great time, you guys, for you to now read the 15th Amendment reading. So please, please read it. There are some guiding questions at the bottom that you should probably look at as well. Okay. One of the big things that does happen here during Reconstruction is the rise of independent African American churches. Prior to the war, African Americans were forbidden to hold services, right, without a white prime minister. So even if they were going to church, they were getting taught whatever the white people were learning. And sometimes it was like, slavery, God says is okay. So not the best. And even if they were allowed, they had to go to the back. So a lot of the doctrines that were preached here are very infused with white supremacy. So the fact that they get their own churches, this is going to be a big thing for African Americans. Churches are also going to become more than just a religious center for them. They are going to become the center of political and social life. This is where they start coming together to start becoming activists. If you guys think about it, we're going to really talk about the churches in our civil rights unit. This is where Martin Luther King Jr. started. This is where Rosa Parks started. This is where a lot of these movements, a lot of these protests, a lot of the boycotts start to happen. This is why churches in the South were targeted a lot by a lot of the white supremacists. This is why they were bombed, because they knew that it wasn't just a religious center. This is where a lot of the this is where the action, this is where the power happened. This is where all the queens started to, plan everything. So again, we'll get more into that during our civil rights unit. But it's going to become a strong influence in the community. All right. Also, the churches were where a lot of the school was held for the freedmen that was established with the Freedmen's Bureau. All right, you guys, that is it for Reconstruction. I know it's long, 35 minutes plus the readings. It's probably going to take you a good hour to get through this, but you got this. All right, I'll see you guys next week.